Hey guys, we're here to talk about the Panobridge Mark II made by Noisefighters. I'm Roof Korean 1776, aka Roof Tiger 1776 on Instagram. I had Roof Tiger 76 on Instagram, but it was shadow banned, so now it's Roof Tiger 1776. But anyway, I'm here to talk about a contraption here made by Noisefighters, the Panobridge Mark II. Really cool idea, really cool design. And so I'm going to give you a quick review on it. Actually, it's not quick. There's going to be a lot of stuff I'm going to cover, but it should be all good information for you, and hopefully it all helps you out. So before I start here, I just want to give you guys information about my experience with night vision. So I'm a bit of a LARPer, but I do have some experience with nods. I personally have over 300 hours, logged hours, operating under nods as a professional pilot. So nods used for aviation is slightly different in comparison to feet on the ground guys for ground deployment. When you're flying a helicopter, 8% of helicopter flights is within close proximity of obstacles. The rest of the time it's at a safe altitude, like your high altitude looking at far distances, unless you're flying nap of the earth, which is something I don't normally do. My crew experience is not the same as a person who works on the ground. Now, please remember that they're strictly my opinions and observations. I'm not a night vision expert. I'm just a novice and end user like many of you. Now, I'm not affiliated in any way with Noisefighters or any company out there, and this Panobridge I have here I purchased on my own. Now, I'm not associated with any companies, and I'm completely independent. So the Panobridge is made by Noisefighters, the maker of the best gel ear pads for hearing protection. If you need some comfort from your ear protection, I highly recommend Noisefighters, and they also make this bridge right here. Okay, so initially here, I'm going to talk about construction and design of the Panobridge Mark II. Now, the first thing you're going to notice when you pick it up is it's extremely light and extremely durable. It's a clean construction. It feels and appears to be made of the same polymer materials as Magpul PMags, but this is my perception. It could be something totally different, who knows. What I like about this Panobridge is a very simple, well thought out, streamlined design. Now, when it comes to the Panobridge Mark II, there's two adjustments, or you can look at it as two axis adjustments. You have your interpupillary distance between the eyes and the panoramic angle. So for the adjustments, the tension is set at the factory, and for most of us it's good, but if the end oneer wants to tighten it or loosen it, they can do so if they want to. The arm screws that secure the nods to the arm are captive, which means it'll stay in place, but be aware that they can fall out if you screw them too much. They'll just pop right out. So when you take caution when you unscrew the nods from the arm, or from the bridge I should say. With the Panobridge, the nods can be spanned out for streamlined stowage on the helmet when it's fully stored, or just to get them out of your way. Now, this bridge is dovetail connection only. It won't work with the old bayonet style connection mounts. The Panovision can be panned out to 75 degrees in comparison to a single PVS14, which will only provide 40 degrees of view. There's also an anchor point on the rear of the bridge for a tether, and just in case you drop it. The bridge arm does a good job with keeping nods in position and preventing the nods from rotating in place. I like the design of the bridge arms. It does a good job with keeping the nods in position, preventing the nods from rotating in place. Okay, we'll talk about setup weight in comparison. NVIS 9s are 26.25 ounces. Two PVS14s with a TNVC bridge the non-power TNVC bridge is 26.5 ounces. And two PVS14s with a Panobridge is a total of 25.2 ounces. Underweighing those two other options. The NVIS 9s is used for aviation. It's something I use for work every once in a while. The PVS14 can be reduced in weight by using two different options that you can use. You can either get an updated battery box, which is the Nightline NL914C, which can use either CR123s or AA batteries, which is really neat. Nightfighters carries this piece if you'd like to use that. It uses electronic buttons instead of the usual mechanical switches and knobs for brightness and gain control. Using a CR123 battery would extend the operational time from 40 hours to 75 hours. The other option you can use, or you can use both options in weight reduction, is the Diopter, or what some people will call the eyepiece lens. The first lens you look through can be swapped out with an RPO ultra lightweight polymer lens. Now, doing this will bring the weight down of the entire rig. I'm talking about 2 PVS14s, the bridge, to about 20 ounces, aka a pound and a quarter, which is lighter than even the DT-NVG. So reducing the weight that much will make the Panobridge with 2 PVS14s comparable to a lot of other non-systems out there. Okay, so for my personal setup here, I have a Team Wendy helmet set up with Ear Pro, a weight bag, and it's very stable on here. I'm very happy with the way it works here. Now, note that these helmets, they do eventually get pretty heavy, so when it comes to helmets, well, actually when it comes to backpacking and rucking, every pound counts. Well, in a helmet, every ounce counts on this thing. So try to set up your helmets all nice and light if you can. Okay, so real quick here, I want to cover night vision limitation. Doesn't matter if it's PVS14s, Anvis 9s, DT-NVGs. This applies to all night vision. And trust me, I'm going here because I have a method to my madness here. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to cover visual acuity. So if someone says they have 20/20 vision, that means when they're standing 20 feet away from an object, that means it appears to be 20 feet away. If a person says that they have 20/100 vision, that means when they're standing 20 feet away from an object, it appears to be 100 feet away, meaning it looks farther away, it's kind of harder to see, it's not quite as sharp as it would be for a guy that's 20/20. Now, in cases like me, I have 20/15 vision, meaning that if something's 20 feet away from me, it appears to be 15 feet away from me, so it's a lot clearer for me. So with night vision, the best acuity you can have is up to 20/40, okay? Nod's acuity is based on the lighting environment and natural and man-made lights. In my experience, a full moon high in elevation is the best scenario. It provides the best lighting. Now, starlight on a clear night with a new moon, meaning basically no moon, renders acuity to about 20/80, somewhere around there. If it's dark, overcast, it may be as low as 2200 or no vision. I mean, if there's no light, night vision works on light. If there's no light, it's not going to work. Focus is also another thing you need to think about with night vision. Focus is set to a value on where you want to see. Most people that operate with night vision will set it out to infinity, and for night vision, infinity is 100 feet. And when I say focus to infinity, anything at 100 feet and beyond will be sharp. Anything closer than 100 feet, it's going to be blurry. So if you focus into something closer, anything farther is not going to be clear. So keep that in mind when you're using night vision for the first time. Now, one thing I forgot to mention earlier is when it's dark, when it's really dark, you get a lot of scintillation. That's when you only have starlight light, that's it. You're going to see little sparkles, okay? And sometimes it gets a little annoying. So the most important limitation to bring up is, when it comes to night vision, the image output is sharpest at the center and degrades towards the edges of the field of view, much like our eyes, but only in a smaller scale. Note that depending on the lighting environment, one tube may darken more than the other tube due to automatic gain control. It's a safety feature, and when it happens, it might cause some disorientation because one's going to end up darker and the other one's going to be lighter, and it just all depends on the environment. Also, with nods, is the lack of depth perception. Remember that depth perception is exactly that. It's perception. Just because you have two tubes doesn't mean that it'll improve your perception of depth. Okay, next, we're going to talk about PVS14 issues. A lot of issues that come across PVS14s that are out there across the market is the quality of the PVS14s and how well they're built, maintained, and who you buy them from. If I were you, if you don't have any PVS14s or any kind of NOS for that matter, I would recommend getting your PVS14s from a reputable dealer. If you get it from eBay, you don't know what you're getting. It could be a piece of junk somebody built in the garage. Maybe it could be stolen. Who knows? Anything like that. So go to a reputable dealer. Also, if you already have a PVS14 and you get another one, get your PVS14s collimated. In other words, get them optically aligned. Now, dual tube nod setups are collimated, but single tubes are not because they're not typically used in a dual setup, so they don't bother doing it for PVS14s. So if the nods are out of whack, you'll be seeing misaligned images, and you'll be dealing with accelerated fatigue, disorientation, and you'll also get headaches from that. I've had this problem before with the Panobridge and these nods here, And Neil Brace, the owner of Noisefighters, kindly reminded me of this. Now, it's funny because I should have known better, because in the past I was an optical technician, and this is something I should have automatically thought of. So what you'll see is, if you don't have them collimated, what you'll see is images will be mismatched in elevation. You'll see one image up here, and down here they'll be mismatched, and there's no mechanical adjustment for this on the bridge or the mounting system. So if you want to forego collimation into being like, oh, I got these tubes, I just got the bridge, I gotta try this out, then I highly recommend that you set up the bridge in a standard binocular configuration at first. So that way, if there is some disparity, your eyes can first adjust, and then you go panoramic from there. My eyes and brain could not adjust unless I did this. I literally felt like a Jackson chameleon looking at two different directions at the same time. Okay, so make sure you get that done eventually. Now, when they're not collimated, it'll take your eyes a few minutes for your vision to adjust to it. Your eyes and brains are working overtime to correlate these images that you're seeing. So collimation can be done by the end user, but I highly recommend you take it to somebody professional to do it for you. That way there's less questions and mistakes that can be made to your very expensive night vision. So, my first time experience with the PVS14 Noisefighters Panobridge. So far, I have about 5 to 6 hours of experience under it right now. The Noisefighter website provides a picture of what the image kind of looks like when you use the Panobridge, but I want to say the best way to simulate the Panobridge, take your one toilet paper tube, cut it in half right here, okay? Then put them together and put it against the bridge of your nose. And from here, you'll see what it looks like to look through a dual nod setup like this. Okay, now if you start panning them out right here, this will give you a good idea of what it looks like to look through the Panobridge Mark II. So you have shadows produced by the body of the toilet roll paper tube. Okay, that's what it looks like. There'll be two distinct circles causing non-body shadows you need to get used to. So sometimes when you're wearing the Panovision and you start looking under your goggles, if you need to do something like do a mag change or whatnot, grab a drink of water, light up a cigarette or whatnot, when you look up through the Panovision, it might be slightly disorienting for some of you out there. Any panoramic position other than binocular setting might cause fatigue for lengths longer than 30 minutes depending on the person. It could also depend on how they're feeling that day. Who knows, right? So for operational use. So when it comes to operational use of the Panovision, I've walked about a mile on a very dark and heavily wooded path. It worked great there. I've driven a vehicle for about 15 minutes without headlights. What the hell is that? Oh, it's a squirrel. So I've driven a vehicle for about 15 minutes without headlights and no moon in a clear night within a moderately wooded area, and it worked great. I was able to see things really well. Now, if you decide to do this, I highly recommend that you be careful with this because when you're driving a car with nods, sometimes the interior lighting, like your dashboard lighting or whatnot, can cause reflections because they're not nods compatible. It's a wavelength thing, and what will happen is the light will start bouncing around inside the vehicle, and all you see is a glare over the windshields, right? So if you do that, roll down your windows, check to make sure if your windshield it works with the night vision. Okay. Also, what I've also done with the bridge is I've sat down and smoked cigars and had a scotch and looked around my backyard, which is very wooded. So when it comes to my discoveries of the Panovision, the panoramic mode is best for dynamic movement observation. It's when you're walking around, looking around, when you're driving a vehicle, even if you're flying an aircraft. Although don't do that in an aircraft, FAA has not approved these, so I don't recommend anybody doing that. When it comes to the standard binocular vision, it's great for resting and for optimum visual clarity. That's where you're going to see the best picture. So rapid scans are not affected, but actually improved when quickly scanning the environment with the Panovision. A lot of times when you're using dual tube setups or anything like that, when you look back and forth to the right or left quickly, it can be a little disorienting because you're just looking through 40 degrees of field of view. That's it. And your brain, I guess my brain has some trouble processing that every once in a while. With the Panovision, it really helps me a lot. I've noticed that my head scan is significantly reduced. For example, when I'm like flying an aircraft, my eyes are always doing this, looking down, checking sectors. But with this Panovision, I don't have to do that much, which is really neat. Now, there is some loss of visual acuity due to scope shadow. So those circles I talked about earlier with the toilet paper rolls, when you're doing this, those circles might interfere with some of your visibility. So far I've found that when it comes to panoramic views, 60% is optimal for me. Now, I noticed that my sight will be focused on the center overlapping images, while the rest of the image provides some peripheral vision. If you need to go from binocular to 60 degrees, the setup doesn't require elevation adjustment, but will require some tilt adjustment for optimum range. I also say 60% is optimal because the center overlapping images combines good visual clarity fields from both tubes. If you go any wider than that, you're looking at the least sharpest image from both tubes. 60 degrees doesn't require the shooter to tilt their head in order to use a red dot sight equipped rifle. It works for handguns too, but since handguns are more centered in relation to the body, it's a good idea to turn your head slightly in relation to your dominant eye. So if you go anything past 60 degrees, it'll be harder on your eyes, and using a red dot sight on a rifle or handgun is going to be a little more challenging because you'll need to tilt your head and look to the left. Okay, so for the cons, well, there's not a lot of these, but I'll go over the cons with this Panobridge setup in my personal opinion. So when you go from deployed to stowed, you will feel some flex in the tube arms. Don't worry because the materials can totally handle this. Since there's only one arm for each tube, they will flex when you go from deployed to stowed, or vice versa if you manipulate the setup by the tubes only. This all depends on how stiff your mount is. Now, if you're worried about this, or don't like the feeling of the arms flexing, then I would recommend using both hands. Use one hand to grasp the mount arm, and the other to hold onto the tubes. Now, practice this in a safe space because you can inadvertently press the release button, and this is why I recommend holding onto the nods if you go this way. Now, I'm being extremely critical here. This won't apply to 99% of the people out there, but in a dynamic situation, the tubes can be bumped or knocked out of alignment, and that could be a bad thing if you're in a really critical situation. One example that I'm going to point out about this is supposedly I'm flying a helicopter, and I'm going into a really tight LC. Obstacles here, wires there, building there, things like that, and there's ground terrain that I need to be aware of. And if I'm scanning the scene and I accidentally bump my nods onto something, that means I need to take my hands off the controls and align not just a one, but a two-axis adjustable visual aid, which isn't ideal. Once you take your hands off a helicopter control, it's not a good idea unless it's for like a split second. Now you got to start adjusting the interpupillary distance and the Panovision, and then put your hands back on the control. That's something that's not ideal. Now, if there's a way to lock the Panovision into position, that would be ideal, but then you're adding weight and complexity to the design, which is something that I wouldn't be too crazy about either, but it's a compromise when you think about it. Also, don't forget that you can tighten the pivot screws about a quarter to a half turn to tighten them up to prevent this from happening. Now, for many of you, or most of you, this won't be a problem. Now, I did talk to Neil about this, and he will be working out a possible locking solution. But that's what I really like about him and his company. It's they're always improving, and it's all about innovation, which I really like. So, ending thoughts about the Panovision Mark II made by Noisefighters. First and foremost, it's designed and made in the USA. It's a veteran-owned business. Their customer service is excellent. I sent Neil an email about 2 or 3 weeks ago asking some detailed questions about the Panovision, and within a half hour, he actually called me up. I thought it was a prank call. I was like, who is this guy? And I answered the phone. For some reason, I was like, it could be somebody important, and it was Neil. Now, Neil cares about his products and is always striving to improve them if needed. So in the very near future, Noisefighters will be offering a mounting arm that will mount the Panobridge for the FLIR Breach PTQ-136 Tactical Thermal Imaging Monocular in the very near future. Now, this FLIR Breach is about the size of a PVS14, and it provides comprehensive thermal imaging for enhanced situational awareness. Now remember that thermal is good for situational awareness, but not provides means for PID, aka positive identification. If I were to guess, you'd be using the Panobridge in the standard binocular configuration like you would, but run a single PVS14 or a single thermal, one or the other. I don't know how well the FLIR Beach could be work as an overlay, mainly because you can't adjust the knots and the FLIR laterally. It's only a pivot, right? So because of the bridge design, I can't really see them being used at the same time. Who knows? Maybe you can. With this setup, man, I would love to take a night vision carbine course someday. That's something that I might get later on. The other good thing about the Panovision and Noisefighters is the Panovision Mark II has a lifetime guarantee, so if it breaks, they'll replace it. At first I was a little apprehensive about getting the Panovision because I've already got a TNVC non-powered bridge, and also my experience with dual tube setups, how it would affect me and things like that. But actually, I've been really impressed with this product. It is awesome. When it comes to price, the Panovision Mark II is mid-range. Considering the price range for a quality bridge mount, there's some lower cost ones, there's higher cost ones. I would say the Panobridge is right in the middle, and I think it's well priced myself. So the thing about the Noisefighters Panobridge Mark II is it's the best reason, or you can say excuse, whichever way you want to slice it, to own two PVS14s. If you already have one, right, why not get another one? Especially if you also have a helmet and an arm. So it's not in your budget to buy the latest and greatest GPNV G18, which is the quad eyes, and also $45,000. This is the next best alternative. I mean, that's all I gotta say about that. So all in all, I highly recommend it. You won't be disappointed. And in the end, I hope this review helps you out in some way. So remember, be good to one another when you can. Stay out of trouble, but if trouble finds you, make sure you have the unfair advantage with planning, gear, and training. Take care, and I'll see you later. This thing on?